Hello everyone, welcome to another Animation Friday, and today I thought it would be interesting to briefly address some characters, in particular male characters within animation that are my personal favorites. Now, I'm not purely basing this list off of looks, so it's not my favorite hottest men or male characters. Or boy characters really. Uh, well, their majority are more on the uh, man side of the spectrum here. But regardless, these were the ones that I found to be probably the most interesting to me. I found these ones to have probably the most character. Um, as far as likability is concerned, I think too likability is another thing that I think sort of, I guess you could say, attracts me towards these male characters. Um, but I don't try to purely base it off of whether or not I'm attracted to them as a female. So I did try to make a list that I thought was kind of diverse in a way, um, and just sort of reflects onto just my thoughts and ideas when it comes to these male characters and why I think these ones in particular stood out to me. So without further ado, let's go through the list. First one I think being a very obvious one, and that character is Aladdin. Now, looks aside, Aladdin is probably is probably the best, I think, representation of a Disney prince that we have seen so far. Um, at least as far as uh, at least as far as Disney princes within the 90s and throughout. He is probably one of the ones that stands out the most, at least to me. There's another prince that we'll get to, but I wanted to address Aladdin first since it's kind of the obvious one out of the gate. Um, the reason why I like Aladdin a lot is because not only is he the first prince that sort of gets his own title, but the film again primarily focuses on him. It's not on a princess. Usually, and in the majority of Disney fairy tales, the princess is the main character. The princess is usually the one who is the main center of attention, or the primary focus, um, or maybe even the secondary focus. But again, the prince is usually on the same, either on the same level with her, or not as focused on. Um, but the film Aladdin chose to sort of flip it on its head, and focus on the male character and not the female character. Now, Jasmine has sort of an arc with her going on, but she's not the main center point or focus of attention. Um, and I think that's something that really stood out to me as far as a film goes, was the fact that they chose to make it about him primarily. Um, and again, he has his own story. He has his own arc. It's not like he's trying to compete for attention with another character. Um, so I think that's something that I think a lot of people, in particular, I think a reason why boys gravitate more towards Aladdin, because the prince is the center of the film, and not the princess. Uh, Also, I find his character to be one of the more realistic, um, more character-oriented princes. The princes that we've seen primarily from Disney have usually been sort of in the background, because again, the princess is the primary focus and the center of the films usually. And they're kind of, when they're given that kind of secondary role, they either come out as kind of just okay, um, but I think nothing really stands out about them as far as um, really an in-depth personality is concerned. Um, but again, I'll explain too why the other prince that I chose, technically prince here, uh, also sort of tries to meet Aladdin on that same level. But I felt like Aladdin, not only was he realistic, he had sort of these flaws that I think, seem like what a male character would sort of be going through, feeling inadequate, feeling, incapable, um, especially especially considering the fact that he lives in poverty. Um, and I think what is good about Aladdin as a male character is he tries to seek self-improvement. Um, he always wants to try to ultimately make things right, even though he, creates problems for himself. Um, and I think that's very important, and I think that really highlights that his character is about trying to improve uh, his circumstances. Sometimes he does it in ways that ultimately are a detriment to him, but he rises above that and ultimately tries to do good and set things in the correct direction. And I think that's very important. And I think that's very inspiring um, a very inspiring thing uh, for boys and for men out there. So I think it's definitely one that I think is very admirable, while also being at the same time realistic and kind of down to earth. Um, so yeah, I think that's just something that I've noticed from Aladdin that sort of stands out as far as male characters go. I mean, he has his flaws and he does try to skate by at times, but as the story progresses, you see how he tries to um, ultimately set things right and in put things in motion that will ultimately um, result in positive outcomes for himself and those that are around him. So I think that's just something that stood out to me and I thought was really important to have. And so that's why I think Aladdin is one of those characters that really does work. Now the next one that I'm going to be talking about, again, he's technically a Disney prince, but again, he's not the center focus of the film. Again, he's sort of playing compete with the princess. But at the same time, he is one of those male characters that, he stands out. He is entertaining to watch. He is fun. And in sort of maybe a different way, I think, than Aladdin is. But that character is Flynn Rider from Tangled. This guy is just. He just has the funniest and the funniest ego about him. He's very he's very all about himself, but not in a way that's really mean spirited or looking down on anybody else. He just has that confidence. He has um that kind of that sense of like that he's kind of in control, so to speak. Aladdin has confidence, but again, he doesn't have the same, I think, kind of suave ego that Flynn Rider has. Um, because Aladdin kind of throughout the film tries to, lie about who he is and try to fabricate and create a fictional world for himself. Um, you could sort of say that Flynn Rider does a similar thing by, having a sort of an alter ego name and such. But I think his character is more primarily focused on, you know, he develops into, I guess you could say, a more caring person and less egocentrical in nature. And I think that's something that's definitely uh, good for for a male character, because usually male characters like to display this sense of ego. Um, but again, it's also important to take other people's um, feelings and ideas into perspective, and kind of um, see somebody um, worth uh, worth something that is a worth appreciation, maybe over yourself at times. I think that's really what Flynn sort of learns throughout the story. And again, he is a thief. He does kind of have that con. I mean, he's not necessarily a con artist, but he just kind of he reflects onto this kind of alter ego. But he doesn't really deny necessarily who he is. It's not like with Aladdin where he's trying to really embrace that fake persona. Um, Flynn Rider just kind of is. He just displays more half truths. But he's not trying to fabricate a whole story. And even midway, he sort of kind of reveals a little bit more about who he really is. And again, that ego, that self-confidence, there's a lot of charm to it, I think. And this is where it leads to a lot of funny moments, where he is kind of full of himself. Especially even at the end when he's like, and after years and years of asking, I finally said yes. Just that kind of just that kind of funny just that it's just that kind of ego that that he has this fullness of himself, confidence, but at the same time, he really is caring. He really is a good person. It's just that you don't take his words all too seriously, because he's kind of over exaggerating himself. And I think a lot of male characters tend to do that. They over exaggerate who they are, because they feel like they need to obtain, I think, this grandiose image. And again, it's not necessarily by lying. It's just by saying how awesome you are. And then just how cool you are, and how like when you pay compliments, you're the character that just goes, I know I am awesome. Again, it's that confidence in is something that I think, again, it is attractive, it is um appealing, but it also is likable. And I think it just really works, and it creates great entertainment and great comedy. Um, and I think he's definitely a male character that embraces that. And you do see him sort of develop into a more caring person, and you see that he breaks down his ego at times. Um, for the sake of those that are around him, in particular Rapunzel. So I think that's just something that's very interesting to note, and I think is a sort of a good, interesting reflection of a male character. He has his ego, he has his confidence, um, he has this identity surrounding him. Um, but he's also understanding and sympathetic to other people, and is willing to make sacrifices for other people. So I think that's just something that's very important to uh, to note. And he learns to of think about others as opposed to just himself. um, and his own selfish interests. So that's, I think, something that's very important to note, and I think it's something that male characters can sort of learn from, and he's just a lot of fun to watch. I mean, he's just entertaining, and that's, you got to give him credit for that. So yeah, I think that's really ultimately all I can say about that character. The third one that I wanted to mention is Robin Hood from Disney's Robin Hood, the anamorphic animals or anamorphic beings. I don't know how you um, I don't know how you address really anamorphic, but but basically they act like humans within their mannerisms, but they're animals. So what I like about Robin Hood as a character, and again, this is not really the best Disney film. It's kind of standard almost, I'd say. Um, but what I do like about Robin Hood as a character is there is this sort of gentlemanness to him. Um, he has this he's very respectful. He has this care for other people. um he seems to have this very um very very confident yet friendly masculine demeanor about him, and I think that really works for this story. um and this and despite those good qualities, he also is very mischievous. He also does things that we would maybe consider kind of childlike, especially when he, does the schemes against the King John character, who's our antagonist within the film. Like you can tell that he has this boyishness to him in the way he plans out these elaborate um, traps, so to speak. So there is this part of him that I think, you know, um, he wants to stand up for, justice and for righteousness, but he has a very kind of um, a very again, it's very he has a really uh, mysti- mischievous approach to doing it, because he, I mean, and I think largely that's in part to do with the fact that the antagonist is very is just the antagonist is almost very uh I would say sort of unmasculine, because he always cries for his mom. He doesn't really like resemble any kind of strength or anything. He gets all his guards to fight the battles for him. And it's almost like Robin Hood is sort of playing on his level by pulling kind of childlike pranks on him. And I think that's really interesting for a male character to have this interesting dynamic of being a very suave kind of romantic gentleman to the protagonists, while also displaying this very um, childlike, goofy um, behavior towards the antagonist. It's almost like he treats people how they sort of treat him, and other people. So King John does very disrespectful things to the protagonist, and Robin Hood responds by kind of going down to his level and treating him as sort of a child, as maybe even an idiot at times. So this is very, I find that to be very fascinating. And I think is a very interesting part of Robin Hood's character that I think usually people don't really read into, but I read into it when I was watching the film. So, again, it's not the best of Disney films, but I find his character to be one of the more interesting, um, because he had this very, very interesting way in how he approached his interactions with other people within the film, or anamorphic life forms that are in the film. Now, this is one that is not from Disney. I tried to find ones that stood out to me that were not from Disney canon, and it was sort of hard to do that because I thought a lot of the DreamWorks characters were kind of meh. They were the male characters were kind of on the same even playing field for me. Um, it was sort of difficult to find ones that I guess you could say stood out. Um, yeah, there's ones that are funny, like the El Dorado characters. They're very goofy, but they sort of resembled like male characters that I've seen before. So I didn't find that it didn't really stand out so much to me. I looked at Shrek, and although I think he is likable to a certain extent, I find Fiona's character to be a little bit more interesting. Um, and I think Shrek kind of complains a little too much for my taste. So I didn't think he was that. Um, I don't think he was as of a standout character to me as much. So yeah, it was kind of hard to go through and pick anything out of DreamWorks, but I did manage to find one from 20th Century Fox, and that is Dimitri from uh, uh, from Anastasia. Now, I did mention Anastasia's one of my favorite non-Disney female characters. Dimitri is on that sort of same playing field. Now, some people might be saying, "Oh, why do you find him so interesting?" A lot of people are gonna probably assume the looks because yes, he is very attractive. Okay, I'll say that. But it's also his personality that I think is interesting in this particular film. Again, not the best animated film out there. Again, similar to Robin Hood, but I think he's still a standout character. What I like about this character is even though he is not the main character, he gets a really full developed arc here. He starts off as a complete liar and con artist, and he's not really ashamed of it. It's not like Aladdin where Aladdin feels like he has to lie in order to be accepted. Dimitri just lies and he doesn't care. Um, he is totally cool with going around and playing, playing a con artist for Anastasia because he knows that there is monetary value in it. So again, he sort of starts out as not caring. Um, and I think also too he has a sort of a big ego. Um, Maybe similar to Flynn Rider, but maybe a little bit more snarky. Uh, maybe a little bit more combative to Anastasia, as you'll see within the beginning. They're kind of butting heads a little. But they're just mostly teasing each other. It's not really, I think, really all that. It's not really as a it doesn't feel like it's hate filled. Um, and I think as the story goes on, he suddenly starts to let go and actually realize um his mistakes. And again, he, like Aladdin, he kind of tries to want to put things right in its place. and he wants to ultimately do the right thing. And again, even at the end when he is ultimately given an award because he did really accomplish what he was initially sent out to do within the film, he rejects it and he feels unworthy of the award. And I think that just shows a significant amount of character, because usually you don't see, you know, male characters reject an award. Or at least when money is involved, they usually don't reject it as much. You know, he but in this film he does reject it, and ultimately doesn't expect anything to happen from his contribution. Um, and I think that just shows, you know, his level of willingness to, you know, take responsibility and realize that he may not be worthy of of uh, because his intentions were self-centered. But I think that's something that's very important to note. And also, he was sort of, you know, willing to put himself on the line to, you know, for other people, you know, and put their interests before their own. Um, and this is not just Anastasia, but as well as the grandma too, and you know, realizing the the importance of Anastasia ultimately sort of um, finding her family. So again, I think you do see him fully go through this kind of arc. Um, and usually male anime characters don't have this kind of an arc. Usually usually it's something like looks like what we've seen with Shrek and the Beast. Um, but it's I don't think it's been done in this way. So yeah, that's why I find him interesting. And he's very entertaining, I think, also to watch. That's, I think, another important thing to consider too. Is it's just that he's fun to watch. He's like Flynn Rider. He's very entertaining. He's very engaging. He sucks you in. Second to last character I wanted to mention, Tarzan from Tarzan. Back to Disney again. Tarzan I find to be a sort of a good representation um, of the innocent sort of the innocent uh, the innocent masculine character, so to speak. What I mean by that is that he displays this sort of level of innocence that you'll see throughout the film, because he's very curious. He's very, you know, he has a lot of depth even when he's not speaking, especially when, you know, like he touches Jane's hand for the first time and it's another human being. You know, I mean, even though he's not saying anything, you do feel how much weight that scene has on him as a character. And I think there's just, again, this sort of innocence to him, like his curiosity, his willingness to, you know, learn about humans. Again, this kind of bright optimism that he has, um, and also his sort of struggle between manhood and animal kingdomhood, I guess you could say, is something that's very extensively highlighted within the film, and ultimately how he feels pressured into choosing, and how he's kind of conflicted, um, because of the way he was raised as to the person that he truly is. So I think that's something that works to the film's advantage too. Um, and I think there's also a lot of funny moments that come out of him when he is behaving more animal-like, um, and a little bit more on the curious side. When he's when he's messing with Clayton, that's always fun. Uh, but there's just this that he doesn't have really any ill intent. It's just he just has this naivete because he doesn't understand, humans in the same capacity as other humans understand humans. So that's very entertaining to watch, and that's what I find really interesting about him, um, as a character. And he has a lot of strength to him as well, which is also, I think, very admirable. And you see how his strength really does impact the film. Um, and I'm talking, I'm talking more on the physical level, only because again we are within this very animal-like setting, um, and and you really do see him trying to ultimately impress his gorilla dad. That's really a focus too, and there's this innocence to it, like he's trying to do whatever in his power to prove himself. And I think that's very important for a character to have, um, and I think Tarzan's character sort of embraces um, that aspect. And again, he has the flaws of ultimately um, bringing his family into danger, but again, ultimately trying to kind of set things right, from his mistakes. So again, it has the similar elements to Aladdin, but again, Tarzan is really a completely different character in that is he's more about curiosity. He lets the impact of learning about humans um, cloud his judgment. Um, and I think that's something that's very important to the film and to his character. So it's interesting to see it from that angle. Um, and it's nice to kind of see a male character that's that just wears like a loincloth and is all buff and just but still full of innocence and charm. And yeah, I think Tarzan embraces that to to the max. Last character that I'm going to mention is Ralph from Wreck-It Ralph. Um, what I do think is good and interesting about this character, um, unlike a lot of the other characters that I've been mentioning, this character is seen as sort of a threat, sort of similar to in a way that Quasimodo is kind of seen as a threat. The reason, though, I think Ralph is more of an interesting character is because we treat him as the bad guy because he is the bad guy within the video game. Um, but it's more about, uh, but it's not just about him learning to be um, good so much as it's him trying to learn to fit in, similar to Quasimodo. But the thing is I think with Wreck-It Ralph's character, there's a lot more to him than just him being like pure innocence and sunshine and rainbows like Quasimodo. I mean, Quasimodo's character is like completely sunshine and yeah, innocence and oh, he sort of plays a child to me. You don't feel like it's a male character. You feel like it's a child that's not fully developed um, into a character. Whereas Wreck-It Ralph, you do feel that there is some kind of masculinity tied to his character, uh, by the fact that he crushes things. He's um, he has that sort of very uh, he has that masculine talent. Um, he's he's a he's a lot more he's a lot more questioning of he more questions himself, um and as to, I guess, what is wrong with him, as opposed to Quasimodo's character who knows already, yeah, I'm I'm ugly, that's why I don't fit in. Whereas Wreck-It Ralph's reason for not really fitting in is I think a little bit more complicated than that, because he's part of the game. uh it's just he's not part of the good guys of the game. And so instead of contributing anything, he only knows how to tear things down instead of build things up. Um, so I think that's just a lot more of an interesting way of looking at it. And I think it makes for a more interesting uh, character, because he has this sort of conflicting understanding of himself, and where he fits in. Whereas with Quasimodo, it's purely based on the fact that people they find him ugly, and therefore they see him as a threat somehow. Um, whereas with Wreck-It Ralph, it's the fact that he is part of the bad guys, but he ultimately wants to somehow show that he's good in order to fit in, but he doesn't know how to do that since his talents are primarily to break things down. Um, and you ultimately see how his character develops, and um, ultimately ends up finding some acceptance. And I think that's just, I think it's just told in a more, it's just told in, I think, a little bit more of a developed and more interesting way than Quasimodo's story and sort of arc. And again, Quasimodo's character I find a little less interesting, because there's nothing really, um, you know, he has this innocence to him, and it's great, but it's not that appealing to me. And again, Wreck-It Ralph kind of has this sort of innocence to him, even though he breaks things all the time. And he's trying to fit in. And when he tries to fit in, you see how kind of goes wrong, and it leads to a lot of entertaining moments. Whereas for Quasimodo, you just kind of feel sorry for him the whole time, and he's just kind of just there for the sake of, I'm the innocent child that will be free um, one day. So yeah, I think there's just a lot more to Wreck-It Ralph than there is to Quasimodo, as far as on a character level and sort of a story level. So uh, yeah, but those are the male characters that I thought were the most interesting, the ones that I found to be the most entertaining to watch. Um, I know there's probably definitely others out there that I haven't mentioned or haven't maybe even thought of. Again, there's a lot of characters out there, so it's hard to come up with a list. But that's the list that I came up with, and I thought was um, and I thought those characters in particular stood out to me. But I'm more than happy to hear what anybody else has to say, if they have their favorites. I'm sure everybody has their own list, and I'd be more than happy to hear them. But I think that's really ultimately all I can say for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you all have a pleasant day, week, month, and year. And I hope to see you on the next video. Take care.